Go ahead and get going. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's forum, Black Men in the Helping Professions. I'm your faculty moderator, Joy Tsuhako of the Sociology Department here, and proud member of Falcons Rising. This is a panel hosted by Falcons Rising, which is a faculty-driven committee inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, which aims to bring meaningful and sustainable reforms that address Cerritos College student experiences with racial inequity. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Hakeem Croom, who's the director of Male Success Alliance over at Cal State Dominguez Hills. Hi, Hakeem. We also have Camille Henderson, who's faculty in the Department of Social Work, Cal State Dominguez Hills as well, and also my fellow cohort member, doctoral candidate in Cal State Long Beach's doctorate for educational leadership program. We also have Rodney Jack, who is a master's in social work student over at Cal State Dominguez Hills, also a former Cerritos College student. Welcome, Rodney. And are we still waiting for Donald to hop on? I'm looking for him.
Yeah, I don't see him, but I think we should continue. I'm sure he'll pop on in a second.
Sure. Okay. And when he does, I'll go ahead and give a little bit of background.
Great.
So I'd like to extend a special thanks again to my cohort mate, Camille, whose ongoing dissertation research provided the inspiration for this panel and for helping to bring together this wonderful group of panelists. So if we could hear a little bit from everyone in terms of their academic and personal background, and if we could start with you, Hakeem.
Yes, absolutely. Again, happy to be here and share space with you all today. Again, my name is Hakeem Croom, pronouns he, him, king. A little bit about my background. So I'm from Harlem, New York, you know, and being someone who coming from, you know, Harlem, New York, and coming from New York City, I have a lot of different ebbs and flows in my story, being all the way now, you know, 33,000 miles away in California. But as far as, you know, my journey into education and just kind of my background, you know, grew up in Harlem. I left at 16 to go to a military boarding school to play basketball. That was one of my gifts. And so I went to Virginia to a military boarding school for 2 years, my junior, senior year. And then I went to a predominantly white liberal arts private school in Virginia, in Farmville, Virginia, Hampden-Sydney College, one of 3, I think, in the country, all male colleges that are left standing. And then from there, I got my BA in economics. I graduated in 2010. And then I also got my master's in educational leadership and policy studies, in 2020 from Sac State. So I took a little break in between my bachelor's degree and master's degree, and I had a whole lot of experience within student affairs and higher ed. I started my higher ed career in 2012. And so I had about 6 years or so, you know, in between starting my career in higher ed in 2012. Before pursuing my master's, I had to make sure I really wanted to stay in this work and do this kind of work, right? And so I then went on and pursued my master's, and I plan on, you know, I'm thinking hard about going to get my EDD in the next couple of years. So I'm sure I'll have some conversations with Camille and a couple other people about that journey. But right now, that's pretty much my background as far as how I got from, you know, Harlem all the way over to California. I'm at Dominguez Hills. I oversee a program called the Male Success Alliance that is one of the pioneer program in the CSU system that was created in 2010 to support racialized males through academic and social support services, holistic support services, in young men's quest for a degree, and also to, you know, be leaders of their families, of their communities, you know, and to also, you know, just, you know, traverse into their career fields and so on and so forth. So I love the work that I do and happy to be in this position and where I am as both a professional, you know, as an educator and also as a Black man. So a little bit about me.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Hakeem. Your comments that you made really remind me of what I always tell my students about having a solid why. because when the going gets tough, right, you're going to have to answer that question. Why am I doing this? Why is this important to me on a deeper level? So thanks so much for sharing. Camille, can we hear about your background, please?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the opportunity. So I was born and raised here in South LA, right up the street from Fremont High. And I went away to college at Hampton University, which is an HBCU in Hampton, Virginia. Shout out to Donald, who's here now. He and I attended Hampton together. And I graduated from Hampton with my bachelor's in sociology, came back to LA for about a year, knowing that I wanted to pursue a helping profession. I thought I wanted to be a child psychologist, but when I went to Hampton as a psychology major, that it wasn't quite the right fit for me. And so sociology is where I found a broader perspective right around systems and sort of how society impacts the way in which one lives. And it resonated with me personally in the lens that I hold. And I always say that I was a social worker before I formally became a social worker, because every single job I've had since I was 14 has been in the helping professions or social services in some way, shape, or form. And so I worked at a domestic violence center here in LA called Genesee Center. I was the children's program coordinator there, loved it, and went on to pursue my master's at Barry University, my master's in social work in Miami, Florida, and pursued clinical training there. Worked in community mental health. So I worked and went to school at the same time. Did that for 8 years. I began to specialize in specialized therapeutic foster care, which is a more intense sort of level of care for children who are in out-of-home placements. So I was not only a clinician, but I also began to train foster parents and sort of cut my teeth around recruitment and licensing. I then moved to Maryland and spent 8 years in Maryland doing very similar work initially, but more in an administrative role, and became the recruitment and training coordinator, licensing foster homes, et cetera. And then I went to on to do philanthropic work. I was a program officer at the Annie E. Casey Foundation, which is a national philanthropy that focuses on the well-being of kids and families. And I did juvenile justice reform there nationally. So I developed different programs that help to address issues around racial equity, juvenile justice reform, and a specific niche that I was able to develop was work around helping to develop talent pipelines. So I did a lot of leadership development and organizational development work. I piloted 2 successful initiatives, one that focused on a partnership with various Native American and tribal across tribal countries throughout the United States to address juvenile justice reform and some disparities around that. And then I also led an initiative in partnership with the White House initiative on HBCUs that helped to really partner with different public institutions, particularly in Florida, to help faculty understand sort of their role in helping to develop the next generation of social justice champions, right? And so did that work for a while, came back home in 2015, continued to basically consult for the foundation and other organizations. So I still hold a consulting practice, but I found my other home in Dominguez Hills. And in part, what inspired me to join DH, particularly in the Department of Social Work, is not only was it, you know, a institution of higher learning that I had been aware of since, of course, you know, I had lived in LA, but I also understood that the importance of doing racial equity work in a practical way, and really sort of training and inspiring students to see themselves beyond the classroom and beyond the messages that people tell them, right? So I've been fortunate to be in the Department of Social Work, who centers we center our theoretical framework in critical race theory. So our students are actually doing something similar to the work that I did with HBCUs, right? Looking at social justice through a racial equity lens. So I'm honored to now be with the department for 4 years in my current role as admissions coordinator, in addition to overseeing the 3-year part-time program. I also teach courses in our program, and prior to that, I was a part-time lecturer. So been with the department now for since 2016. And I'm happy to be here doing this work and expanding on all of that knowledge and the opportunity to really sort of move forward and push the needle in a different way.
Wow, Camille, what an incredible range of experience, really showing the power of helping professions and all the wonderful things that we can do to help our community. Also want to give a plug for sociology majors, knowing that you have your undergrad in sociology. There's so many wonderful things that we can do with that degree. And lastly, the last plug I want to give is you mentioned that you went to an HBCU and worked with them. I'm dropping in the chat a link to our transfer center with some info about HBCUs. California community colleges do have partnerships with HBCUs, so please consider attending one for a rich experience after you transfer. All right, let's go ahead and move on and hear about your background if we could. Rodney.
Thank you for letting me be here. My name is Rodney Jack. I'm actually from New Jersey. I'm 3,000 miles away as well. I spent 7 years in the Marine Corps. I actually taught leadership in the Marine Corps. I went from there to working for BNSF as a locomotive engineer. I went from there to working for DCFS. I graduated Cerritos in 2005. And so I was at work one day and my coworker kept bugging me. She's like, "You're wasting your time. You're doing too much. You're not doing enough for yourself." And so I kind of told her, "If you want me to go to school, you do the application, I'll go." So she did the application and I went. I graduated from Dominguez two years ago with my BA, and now I'm in the master's program. One of the reasons why I chose, or the biggest reason why I chose Dominguez, A, is because it's home to me, and B, because it's CRTI. I really appreciate the professors and the theories that we use and how we can take theory and put it into practice. They're very encouraging in that. It's been a great journey so far. I'm also a 20-year football coach. I coached Pop Warner for 20 years in underserved community. I was a boys and girls basketball coach. So I've been around long enough to understand the importance of race, equity, how it impacts. The railroad was probably one of the most racist organizations I've ever worked for. And working with children in underserved communities, your experience is vast, broad, and it's huge. So I'm happy to be here, and I thank you.
Thanks, Rodney. I appreciate you sharing the reasons that you chose Dominguez Hills. I think for students, it's important to know that it's not just that their sort of application is being judged, but that students have a right to also judge the schools that they're going to make sure it's going to be a good fit for them. And we also have Dr. Donald Grant. Are you available? I know he joined us a little bit late. He is.
Sorry that I joined a second late. But in addition to all of the wonderful people who have introduced themselves, as Camille indicated, or excuse me, as Professor Henderson has indicated, I am Donald Grant, and we are alumni from HBCU Hampton University. I'm here to support these efforts. My name is Donald Grant. I have a PhD, PsyD, in clinical psychology, and working to really amplify the voices of the marginalized communities across Los Angeles. I work with a variety of systems and workspaces inside Los Angeles County. I look forward to having this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Grant. All right, moving on. I know I mentioned that it's Camille's dissertation research topic that kind of provided the inspiration for this panel. So can you tell us a little bit about what your research has found so far regarding Black men in the helping professions, Camille?
Sure. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about kind of the origin story of this, which really was observation, right? Just my practical observation in the classroom and beyond. So initially as an adjunct professor here at Dominguez Hills, I noticed empirically that while, even just Black students in general, the number of Black students that I saw in my classroom really started to diminish. And it was pretty startling to me. But as an adjunct, I didn't know why, didn't really ask questions, but it was something that sort of perplexed me. And I did have conversations with colleagues in the department, and we all sort of came to the same conclusion around observations that they had in their classrooms as well. We would say, we noticed that the number of Black students are dwindling, and in particular, Black males. So what I did was, as the admissions coordinator, and I kind of got my feet wet first, but that sort of question and the concern still sort of was in me. And so I just began to look at the data. I asked for the university data to get a sense of what I was looking at. And what happened was that the quantitative data matched essentially my empirical observations. And that is essentially over a 3-year sort of trend. The snapshot that I took, the 3-year trend, revealed that our Black student population has significantly dwindled, but in particular, the number of Black men who were in our program dipped by about half. And so with that, as I began to think about and explore the different options around my dissertation and what I was going to study, that sort of question of why and what happened really sort of gnawed at me. And so I pulled together data prior to joining the EDD program and shared it with different colleagues in the department. We have a community advisory committee that sort of helps us look at different issues that matter to us in the department. I shared that data with them, and we formed a task force to really do something about what we saw. And so with that sort of being inspired by that practical work, it really sort of gave me the impetus to move forward in a formal direction to look at the research and pursue that as a dissertation topic. And so in addition to my empirical observations and the quantitative data that I pulled just in my day-to-day role, what we see in the peer-reviewed literature is a very similar phenomenon, right? So there are very few studies that look at Black men, not only in social work, but in the helping professions. There are some studies that definitely talk about men, right, in the helping professions and their lack of representation. There are some studies that talk about Black students. There are also are studies that talk about men of color, but there are very rare studies that examine Black men in particular. And I think if we apply a lens of intersectionality, right, and understanding how systems impact our multiple sort of identities, it's really important to understand that uniqueness and the ways in which Black men have a very unique and particular experience in this country, especially as we look at the history of, the United States. And even, over the past several years, I think the sort of visibility of the stereotypes and the stigma that persevere and sort of tell a different narrative and one that's negative pretty much around Black men and who they are, counters what I personally have seen and what I personally have experienced, right? And so one of the other things I have seen thus far in my research is that, similar to how I sort of had that sort of empirical question and wanted to sort of dig a little deeper and have conversation with my colleagues, what I would call water cooler talk. Well, the literature is lining up in a water cooler fashion, right? So for instance, in research, we know that peer-reviewed literature is king, right? So if you look at specific journals, right, and academic journals essentially help to drive the thinking around research and practice. But what was happening is everything that I found that specifically talked about Black men in the helping professions, specifically social work, were blog articles, or what we would call gray literature, very informal types of literature that, while valuable and it contributes to public discourse, it doesn't necessarily help move the needle from an academic perspective, which again, a lot of times grant research and funding and money sort of can be tied to that because that lends a certain level of credibility. So my aim is to contribute to that in a formal way by pursuing this as my dissertation topic to start.
Thanks for providing that background and context for us, Camille. I'd love to hear from our other panelists how this resonates or how this relates to your personal experience as you were moving through the academy, making decisions about what you wanted to do, where you wanted to go. How did these dynamics come into play? Rodney, would you like to share?
So I'll share. My knowledge is not as vast, but my experience is. I've always had a hunger and drive to be represented and to represent myself. Watching and becoming from communities of color, underserved communities, you recognize that there's a need. And so I work for the Department of Children and Family Services. I've been there for 15 years now. I do see there's a lack of representation in the department, especially men of color. So I think my experiences and what I've been able to grow through as a part of my academic process has really shaped my lenses, right? And has broadened my perspective on the need to get more involved. I do think that having more people that represent people that look like me give us an opportunity to really have a prominent leadership position at the table, right? We can not only come to the table, but we have more to talk about. I think what Professor Henderson is correct about was that there needs to be more studies. We know that studies drive research, the monies are connected. So I believe that if we can take the time to really incorporate more men of color into the conversation and create a dynamic where we work more together, I think we'll get a better idea of how to move the work forward.
Yeah, Hakeem, can you jump in and share what prompted you to enter the helping professions?
Yeah, of course. I think, my story is really nuanced, but I can say that, coming from Harlem, I came from a family. I was fortunate to grow up with a 2-parent household, and being able, although we didn't have a lot of resources, we had a lot of, I call them the MVPs, morals, values, and principles. That and one of those values and principles instilled in us is a love for learning and education, right? And I think part of it is like, as a Black man, as a planet that represents, the Black community, one of the things in regards to the structure and the system of educational inequality, right, and educational disenfranchisement from a historical standpoint is that Black people have always loved education, always wanted to learn, but school is another thing, right? That's a structural, systemic thing, right? Schooling versus like sheer education and wanting to learn. And so my dad, who didn't even graduate high school from Kinston, North Carolina, was a man who wanted, made sure that we read books. We had a bookshelf in the house. Even when we was on punishment, I was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. I was reading Roots as that was my time out reading, right? And so he was very, both him and my mom were very, adamant about us pursuing our education, and doing more and taking things to the next level. And so, when I was in elementary school, being in the Black environment, I was around just so much information, so much knowledge. And it was actually, as I look at it now as, 35-year-old male, educator, looking at the privilege that I have, right, of being in an environment in Harlem where I had a Black principal, right? So I had a Black male principal, Mr. George Young. That was my principal. We were kids. We used to joke about him and call him like MLK because he looked almost like Martin Luther King. We used to always joke about him, but looking back, like that was one of the first people that I saw in a position of power that looked like me and had a similar experience. and being around a lot of, Black professors and Black, staff, and from the janitor on to the principal was something that was just super beneficial, and being able to see that positive racial socialization at a young age. And I was so fortunate to be able to have not only in the house, affirmation, right? I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Harlem, in the middle of 5 kids, there's 7 of us. But in the living room, we had a picture of like MLK, Malcolm X, and Marcus Garvey, right? And so every day I was getting passive education in my own home, that's serving as a buffer, and then going to my school and being able to see, some of those different things, right? As far as the resources, we didn't have a whole lot as far as resources, but I was able to take so much as far as being able to have a knack and a curiosity, right? And daring to dream, and coming from those communities, those environments. A lot of people, you are, because your basic needs aren't being met. We know about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And actualization, we're stuck at the bottom where, your stomach is grumbling. You might not eat for 3 days. How can you go to class and be, focused on learning when you haven't had food for 3 days, right? So I think some of these things in regards to what I was able to come out of, but also like come out of, but still hold near and dear as far as how I show up, right? My authenticity, the things that I bring with me as I navigate different spaces. And so when I had said previously, when I went to military school in Virginia, it was a whole different world, 360. I go from a predominantly Black space to a predominantly white space. Folks looking at me kind of funny style. They say, "Oh, you from Harlem?" So they automatically have things that they think about me or know about me being from Harlem, given what they saw on mainstream television. And so, having to navigate that, right? But learning also, how to knowing what microaggressions are at an early age, not really knowing that was a word or the articulation of it, but knowing what I felt like and knowing some of those things, right? And what folks would say in some instances. And then also going to a predominantly white, male liberal arts college. It was a lot there, right? Especially in Virginia. This is Farmville, Virginia. Farmville had a lot of, Farmville represented about during the Brown v. Board case, 70% of the plaintiffs came from Prince Edward County, which Farmville was a part of, in regards to not wanting to integrate the schools, right, during the 50s. So in a outcry of the white community as far as integration, they closed the schools for 5 to 8 years in Prince Edward County. So there was a lot of just educational disenfranchisement in there. And then you have Henderson College, the school that I went to, in that community as the ivory tower, right? So I'm going to the school, I'm seeing Confederate flags, I'm seeing all types of, I'm on highways named after Confederate soldiers, right? Jefferson Davis Highway, all these different highways that I'm on. I'm driving past Lynchburg, Virginia, all these different things, right? And so going to a school like that, I really got to see like the difference in like what socioeconomic status looks like and resources look like, right? Going from a military school where you didn't really get to see it because we all wore a uniform, but then I went to Hampton, and I'm around kids 18 years old, they're driving Benzes, Range Rovers. I'm a New Yorker, I didn't even have my license. I didn't even, we took public transportation. I didn't even have my license at that time. And so just really opening my eyes and kind of seeing things and like, wow, like, I'm in class. When I was in New York, I had classes in high school, right? I'm in class with 35 people. There's only 15 books, 20 books. Then you open a book, you go from page 1 and you skip 2 through 9 is 1 to 10. You go to the 10th page after the first page. And I go to Fitchburg Military School. I'm in French, right? With like two other students. There's 3 of us in the class, and I'm getting all this extra attention in my French class. So I start to ask questions like, what's the difference here? Why is this so different? Like, what's going on here? Like, so it really made me start to dig and wrestle with what the differences were, like, and kind of while my educational experience was starkly different. And so, going to college, seeing these different things, I majored in economics, and I thought at one point I wanted to go into finance. I wanted to make lots of money, but, I had an internship through Columbia Teachers College, and I was teaching in El Barrio in Harlem and working with 5th graders. And that really opened my eyes to the impact that I would be able to make on the youth. And that was like, okay, this is something here. And plus for me, taking what I represent, kind of knowing, I can be a light at the end of the tunnel and a beacon of hope for the youth and people who look like me and have similar lived experiences. So after I graduated in 2010 from Hampton, I went to the Fessenden School in Boston, Massachusetts, Waltham, Massachusetts. And that was a whole nother experience going from Virginia to Boston, right? Because the way you navigate as a Black person in Boston versus Virginia, there's some things in regards to what you see in dynamics in Boston as far as their history, right? I remember going to the State Museum And we were getting a tour. I was teaching second grade at the time, and we had a tour. And one of the tour guides, older white woman, she was like, "Hey, it's a nice portrait here. We have 2 colored women here in this portrait." This was like 2011. I was like, "Whoa, I haven't heard colored people in like a very long time." Like, so they were like stuck in like a time lapse over there in Boston. So like all these things that I saw and experienced, right? It really gave me the the courage, and just gave me the conviction, to really, do all I can, given my journey, my story, and to really make an impact, right? And bring things to light. I actually went in 2012, I actually got hired to serve as the Assistant Dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Henderson, my alma mater. So, right, so I go from being a student, now I'm an alumnus behind the iron curtain, seeing how things move and shake, right? And so making decisions, talking to former professors, now they're like my colleagues. Now we having like real conversations around DEI work, and being met with like a lot of resistance, right? And having conversations around like, let's talk about how we're all the same, right? As far as diversity. And that's, from my understanding, that's not what diversity is. You know what I mean? Right? We need to talk about celebrate our differences, right? And honor those, and know the histories of these things, right? And have a deeper understanding of our contributions, and how we're all, this world can be a better place if we honor those things, right? And so those are some of the things that really inspired me to get into the helping profession. And even to this day, I went from Hampton City College, I moved to California in 2017. I worked at Davis, UC Davis, so I was a resident director. And coming from the East Coast, you have a particular purview of the West Coast, because right, you come to from the East Coast, and you're told that California is so liberal and it's progressive and there's all these different things. But when I got to Davis, I felt something. I'm like, there's something here. There's something here. I'm still trying to feel what this is. There's something here. So after a while, I'm still experiencing, I'm like, the difference is that it's not overt here. It's covert racism. Like, it's covert anti-Blackness. It shows up differently. Like in Virginia, people told me how they felt. Like I could see it. Like so they gave me the opportunity to kind of navigate and strategize how to get around. And in some areas of California, it's not like that. So it's a different kind of terrain you have to navigate. Even as a Black male educator, right? Thinking about the ways in which Black students have to come through K through 12, and all of these stereotypes, having to go through so many things in regards to the school to prison pipeline, right? Being filtered into special education, getting put on medication, all these different things, right? And then being able to make it to college is damn near a miracle, right? And so then you take the historical significance or just the systemic pieces, war on drugs, mass incarceration, all these different things, socioeconomic pieces. And, you really start to, really think about, from a system standpoint, what are some things in regards to education that we need to uproot to really make sure we have a proper handoff from the K through 12 system to the higher ed post-secondary, system, right, for higher education. And so, for me, after I was at UC Davis, right, and I'll share this with you all, because I think it's important to talk about this and to get real, is that being somebody from New York, right, and being in California, I love it here. I love California. I'm not leaving. I'm not going back to New York. I love 60 and sunny in February. I ain't leaving. But there's things here, right? So I remember when I was at Davis, I was a resident director. I was supervising students, and I had, when my supervisor came to me one day and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you." So I said, "Okay, cool." So I go to my supervisor's office, and he said, "Hey, one of your students, who happened to be a female identified student, said your smile makes her uncomfortable." I was like, "What do I do with that? What do you, my smile, like, what do you mean? What do I do with that? The smile my mom told me to always have, because you have a beautiful smile. You need to continue to do that. I should stop doing that now. And then if I don't do that, am I the angry Black man? If I don't smile, what do I do here?" He's like, "Well, you can just stay away from her." Well, that's my supervisee, so I'll stay away from her. So, okay, cool, I'll do that. I'll stay away. A couple of months later, come back. "I can't need to talk to you." "Okay, cool. Let's talk." We're a couple months later, we're in RD training, resident director training. Go to the office. "Oh, there's actually a Title IX case, a Title IX investigation. And also she added that you put on chapstick in a sexual manner. Chapstick? I put on Burt's Bees in a sexual manner? What the heck is going on here? What is happening, right? And so as a Black, and I feel this is the space to share this because I think we need to understand the depths of being in a space as a Black male, trying to elevate and lift up others and pour in and, you know, and do these types of things. But there's real deep-seated caricatures and stereotypes and Black male misandry that's at the root of these things, right? As far as how to navigate space. So even for myself or somebody like Rodney or Donald, when we walk into places, people already have misconceived notions of who we are before we even open our mouths. So, right, so these are the things that, you know, for me, I had to kind of think about like, wow, this is interesting, you know. And so I went from Davis to Sac State, where I oversaw our MLK Center, a Black student, a BRC, Black Resource Center, and you know, loved doing that work and being over there at Sac State. We had a lot of great, you know, progress over there, pouring into the community, and then you know, now being at Dominguez. And so, but you know, I think again, even with my students, right now we actually have a Black male peer group meeting called Tribe that we have in our space in the Male Success Alliance. So there's about 20 students over there talking about their experience. We do it like every other week to give them a sacred space to do these things. And so really talking about like, what does it look like in the classroom? A lot of the harm is happening in the classroom, you know, right? Professors are looking at students from a deficit lens, not an asset-based lens, right? Now, and then also not having the modalities or the cultural, what's the word I want to use? Competencies, right? To understand help-seeking behavior, understand certain behaviors that you see in certain things, to really be able to reach a Black student, a Black male in particular, in a specific targeted way, right? And so there's a lot there, but I say all that to say that, you know, as far as me being in this profession and being in this help-seeking space, it's something that I take personally. It's something that is a part of my life's work, right? And so I was telling students the other day, when every time I come into my center, come into our space, I just look up like, I know what you're doing, God. I'm not the most religious person, but I'm a spiritual person, but I know that I'm walking in my assignment. And like, I know that like, I can look myself in the mirror at night, knowing that like, I'm doing work that's like really helping to salvage lives, save lives and salvage dreams, right? And Dominguez, we're in South Central. I got brothers that's coming from environments where they were gang banging. Now they're in school. Now they're meeting a Latino brother and they're Black. And they're like, wow, if I wasn't in this space, we would be enemies right now. Right. And so I'm bringing them to this space and convincing them that they need to love each other and be in solidarity. So I've had moments in this space where brothers about to, in the California term, squabble with each other. They're about to squabble. We don't use that in New York, but squabble, that's the Cali word. They're about to squabble with each other. So then I have to mitigate that and get them to a place where like, let's talk about this. Let's learn how to emote. Let's learn how to be able to express ourselves and work on conflict resolution, right? Some of these things you can't quantify. I know we have peer reviewed studies, and you know we got the data and all of that. But some of this stuff is like you can't quantify that, right? That's like really saving lives. I have brothers in here who are about to take each other's heads off and then leaving the space, crying, saying, "Bro, I love you. I apologize," and hugging each other and then going their separate ways. So you got to be there to feel it. You got to be there to exchange that energy. So those are the things that really keep me, in a good space and give me the ability to look myself in the mirror at night and like what I see as a Black male educator.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those experiences. I know there's a lot of reactions in the chat to some of the things that you experience, and we just see, you know, as you said, you know, we can talk about this in statistical terms and we talk about the criminalization of Black life, but what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? What is that lived experience? So appreciate you opening up and sharing that and shedding light, right? That even as you said, this is not just something that happens in the South. This is not just something, right, that we can say happened historically, right? But it is certainly continues to be, you know, in the air that we breathe in, and, you know, use that phrase of targeting Black men. And so many of the examples that you gave were in the negative sense, how historically Black men have been targeted. But I think part of what we're trying to do today is how can we flip that script, right? And target Black men to uplift them, to, you know, to bring them in, right? As you said, the stories that you share. So thank you so much. I want to hear also from Dr. Grant. Can you tell us about how really any of this, right? One of the main things that has been highlighted from both Rodney and Hakeem is the importance of representation and how that in and of itself is a challenge. As Hakeem mentioned, I think, it's a miracle for folks to end up in positions where we can say, that other people will see them and say, they look like me. This is someone that I can relate to, someone that makes me feel comfortable in this space. So what has been your experience? Why did you go into the helping professions?
It's a wonderful question. Thank you so much, Joy. And I respect and honor the narratives that have been shared by both Hakeem, Rodney, and Camille as it relates to this space. I've been fortunate enough to spend an array of my career as both a practitioner in the DMA in the Department of Mental Health and a practitioner in so many different spaces. And now I find myself as a consultant in a variety of spaces whereby the things that Hakeem and Rodney are talking about exist in the helping profession, exist in so many different spaces. And I get the luxury of working with both those individuals who are working in the helping profession as Black men and as Black people, but also in the executive space. And it's been such a wonderful experience to be able to support Black and brown men to amplify their experiences in both of these spaces. And so I know we have a lot to get to today, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, exploring these spaces, but what I want to do is really honor what both Hakeem and Rodney have said as Black men in this space. The problem is that not many people acknowledge the fact that men like Hakeem and Rodney work not just to advance the knowledge and the research associated with these spaces, but they also move forward the narratives of Black men and women who are working in these spaces, who are navigating their internal experience and their external experience. That's a big deal. Not everybody acknowledges the fact that when Black men who enter these spaces decide, as a result of their specific lived experience, that I want to create change in this world, it's a different lens. I was a middle school teacher for many years early in my career after I finished undergrad. And I remember being that Black guy who was situated for support related to behaviors, related to discipline. And in my head, I was a teacher. But because I was a Black man in a predominantly Black school, I was isolated into this space of discipline. As I listened to how Hakeem and Rodney display and describe their stories, my fear is that Black men who are coming into the helping space, whether it be for K-12 education, whether it be for helping individuals in their communities, whether it be for running programs related to success and wellness, the stereotypes about us don't allow us to be the helping professionals that we've come to this space to be. When I was a teacher, my goal was not to be the person who made sure that this individual got detention and this individual did so and so and so. My role was to be a helper. One of the main concerns with the stereotypes associated with Black men today in the helping professions is that we're consistently pigeonholed into the spaces in which we're limited to managing systemic barriers. Now, a lot of people don't understand that it's not just the stereotype that forces us to that space. It's the stereotype that says that when you look at Hakeem, when you look at Rodney, that they're not able to be empathic men who have the capacity to connect with other men and boys and women and families and change their trajectory. I've decided in my career, I don't practice anymore. I want to work with men like Hakeem and Rodney to make sure that when they insert themselves into communities, people see them as valuable assets. Again, not to sit with their kids and discipline them, but to put them on the trajectory that says Black mental wellness is important. And as a result, I'm a Black man who has entered this field to make sure that people are able to access wellness. And one of the main reasons I'm here today is because Professor Henderson, a Black woman who has a Black son, who understands Black America, has dedicated her work to making sure we see this in a holistic framework. Again, the goal here is to both support Black men who are looking to make change, but also help people understand we usually position Black men in spaces of discipline, not in spaces of sociocultural support. What I need people to understand is that these brothers like Hakeem and Rodney here sitting here today, the efficacy that they bring to this field is huge. And if we continue to pigeonhole them into go to class, go to detention, go to your group home, we're doing a severe disservice to the work in the helping professions. And so even though I've honored myself and paid attention to what I find my value in, the macro, it's critical that when we look at brothers like Hakeem and Rodney who have dedicated their worlds to making sure that individuals on the ground are able to experience change and growth and efficacy, that we support that. And then when we see women like Professor Henderson who have decided, even though I am not of that particular framework, I'm dedicated to understanding, supporting, and amplifying those voices in that space. That's why I'm here today. That's why I am so open to supporting what needs to happen, because what I know is that when I look at the disproportionality of Black and brown boys in elementary school, in preschool, who are being defined by their phenotype, I know that men like Hakeem and Rodney are able to fix that. And that's why we need to make sure that schools and that institutions are dedicated to honoring these men and incentivizing them to coming into helping professionals. I've served as a dean, I've served as an executive director, I've served in many leadership roles in higher education, nonprofit, and for-profit. One unique thing that I've seen in this space right here, right now, is that Professor Henderson is making sure that people not only see the need that exists amongst young brown and Black boys of color, but also the systemic needs that exist around men of color who attempt to come into this field, who are faced with the fact that my masculinity at the intersection of my ethnicity limits my ability to be effective. I want to make sure we know that however Hakeem and Rodney present themselves in this space, there's a place for them. There's a space by which young Black and brown boys need to see them. There was a study that came out of North Carolina about 5 years ago that said, if an elementary school kid had one Black teacher One, just one. Throughout their matriculation, it increased their chances of attending college by 13%. If they had two, 37%. This is mind-blowing. The reason I bring this up is because this is the space that we're creating here to demonstrate why everybody on this call who is not a Black man needs to encourage every Black man that they know who's in the helping field to dive in. And every Black man who is attempting to enter this field to dive in and understand that our impact is not just intrinsic, but externally supported by data. Thank you so much, Joy.
Thanks, Dr. Grant. That's actually a great segue to my next question, so that we can begin to think about, programs and how they recruit folks, how do they attract folks? So I'd like to hear from Rodney, based on your experience. You mentioned a little bit about it was the theoretical framework that the Master's in Social Work program over at Cal State Dominguez Hills is part of what attracted you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and why? What was your experience in general with recruitment, awareness of different programs, your sense of the support that you might receive when entering specific programs?
Wow, that's a huge question. I think the reason why CRT stood out to me is because it was about critical race theory and intersectionality. Since as far as back I can remember, I've always had a fascination about race, how it impacts us. Coaching in North Long Beach for as long as I did, I'm going into different areas with my kids that didn't look like us, playing in different positions. It just really drove my behavior. The Marine Corps was really a racist organization as well. Like, I experienced a lot of racism there, but I had support by other Black men around me who made sure that I walked the straight and narrow. I come from a family of strong Black men. So that mindset was already ingrained in me. It's almost like I had a responsibility to step up and do my part. It was really nothing about, it was more intrinsic driven, but it was also about accountability to African-American people, that we need to have a seat at the table, that my voice does matter, that I do need to be heard, and that I need to step up and do more. And so I think that when it came to Dominguez, it was really about the, from what I understood, was the location and the type of environment that it was in. It was multicultural, it was multicultural staff. I had good experiences with it, and my actual coworker was the one who encouraged me. I knew nothing about Dominguez except that it was in Carson. And so I took a step in the dark and I went there, and I liked the campus. I like what I saw. I like with the diversity and the inclusion. Also, as I mentioned before, I worked for DCFS, and I've sat in spaces as a Black male. I've seen the mistreatment of Black fathers. I have done some work with Project Fatherhood. I've interned with them. So I recruited myself. I took the fact that I had a responsibility to myself, my family, my ancestors, my culture. So it was something I've always believed in and I've always been driven to do. I felt like, as Hakeem said, I'm called to do this work. To what capacity, I don't really understand. I have no idea where this journey is going to take me. As a coach of African-American children in underserved communities, I saw a huge need. Lack of leadership, lack of guidance, lack of paternal presence. There's just a lack. And in this day and age, I feel like we're not having those conversations. A lot of times with my kids, we have rap session. I sit down and you could tell me anything you want, and I'll share anything I can to help you see that I come from where you come. I look like you. I've come from, what you've been exposed to, and you can make it out, right? We have to give you an opportunity. But what I realize is that we don't have enough of Black men in those communities doing that work, setting that example, and being men of integrity, wisdom, and knowledge. I mean, grandpa's not there, granddad's locked up, uncles and aunts have gone away, uncles have gone away because of mass incarceration. So there's really not that voice in the community. And so for me, it was really just about being responsible. One of the things I was encouraged about with CRT was it really opened up my eyes that much more. One of the professors once said that CRT is not something we didn't know, but it just gives you the framework and the language to call it out. And I felt like once I started to dive in there, I really started to really dig my heels in and started to, it really just verified what I've always known, right? It affirmed what I've always known and what I've always felt. And to be in a space where you're given an opportunity to really stretch and get challenged, it's a beautiful thing. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be a part of the conversation. And I'm with Dr. Grant. Like, we walk into those spaces, like Hakeem said, where we're automatically marginalized. Me being a little bit older, I've done it for so long that it becomes second nature. I do know at times when you walk into, especially with the Department of Children and Family Services, I've walked in rooms as othered, feeling othered, and that the voice wasn't being heard. And for this to be a systemic organization or a government organization, it doesn't feel good. And at times it feels like, why am I here? You know, I started questioning myself. So I feel like if I want to change, I have to be changed, and I have to change myself to become more equipped with knowledge and have that resource to get better. So that's what my experience has been.
Thanks, Rodney. I think your experience then, moves us right to the next question. What would you all like to see institutions do differently? Right? Where is there room to improve, right? To encourage, number one, as we've talked about, right? Black men to consider the helping professions, and what can institutions do to better encourage students along that pipeline?
Joy, can I jump in right for that
Sure.
one? I love it. It's such an important question. And, I've served as a variety of professionals across these spaces, whether it's related to my work with Department of Mental Health, my work with higher education. What I find is that most organizations, I was a public school teacher in the 1990s. My bachelor's degree is in biology. My doctoral degree is in clinical psychology. And I realized early on after an internship that with my doctoral degree in biology that I did not want to go to medical school. And the only thing you can do with the bachelor's degree at that time in biology was teach middle school science. And I was thrust into this system in Baltimore, Maryland, of teaching middle school science. When you talk about what systems need to do to make sure that we are making systems appropriate for Black men and boys, many of these systems, and excuse me, I want to be very transparent, I want to be very honest, many of these systems are grounded in matriarchy. I'm not suggesting that we have a problem with women in these fields. We know that 67% of every particular school teacher in America exists as a white woman, and that's a given. We get that. What I'm attempting to say through this particular part of my narrative is that schools of education, schools of psychology, they don't do a good job. Again, I'm no disrespect for CSUDH. Again, everybody's doing what they can, but the whole system has not done a good job at inviting men of color into these spaces as non-disciplinarians. How do you attract men to the teaching field? How do you attract men to the clinical field? How do you attract men to help them understand that you are a viable candidate for your LCSW, for your PsyD licensure, for all these things? What I found in my work across higher education, across K-12 education, is that we see, and again, this is connected to the stereotype. Remember, a stereotype is a thought, and a stereotype is fed by all this information that we get from the world. We see Black men and they are disciplinarians. They are the ones who create the structure inside these systems. When I left K-12 education, it was because no one was allowing me to be a teacher. Everyone was requiring that I was a disciplinarian. What we see here with Hakeem and Rodney, they're saying, hey, I'm here for it all. I'm willing to be this, that, this, that, this, that. But what they're saying in their souls, in their hearts, is that their desire is to be a helper. What we know is that most men have not been funneled into those spaces. I think about the movie years ago, Meet the Fockers, and I remember listening to Robert De Niro speak to that character, say, "Oh, you're a male nurse," when in reality, he was just a nurse. He was just a nurse who happened to be a man. And I get it. That whole thing was set up for hyperbole and for comedy. And I work a lot in the entertainment space. But even though that script was situated specifically to make fun of that scenario, men like myself, men like Hakeem, men like Rodney are impacted by that narrative that is so pervasive around our world. When we want to fall into a situation and say, I don't want to be the one to write detention. I don't want to be the one to sit with this kid for 3 hours while he sits and does homework. I want to be the supportive helper. I want to be the one who comes into the county and makes sure that every Black man, every Latinx man, every Asian American man knows that there's a history of trauma that indicates how they move through the world, and I can help them with that. Unfortunately, men like Hakeem and Rodney have been pigeonholed into a space that doesn't allow them to meet their truth, which is why I'm so grateful to be here today, to pay attention and to really amplify the narrative that says, because of our size, because of our phenotype is separate from genotype. Genotype are the genes that we're born with. Phenotype is how those genes present themselves. Because I am a 6'2", 200-pound Black guy, I am oftentimes situated in a position to be the disciplinarian. Sometimes we just want to put skills and tools into an environment that allow people to grow. And what I know is that systems right now, they're not honoring that. They're looking at us as the basketball player, as the soccer player, as the football player, as the disciplinarian. These brothers just want to help young Black people, young brown people reach their epitome. And they're not being allowed to do that. Why? Because just like I was pigeonholed 20 years ago to be the disciplinarian, these men are not allowed to practice the expertise that they have developed across their years of learning as a helper. We have to work hard to make sure that when Hakeem and Rodney walk into a room, they're not seen as the person who says, sit down, put your books away, put your backpack away, stand up, speak loudly, that they're the ones who are able to say, what was that experience like for you when you revisited your trauma? What were you thinking about when you were sexually assaulted? What was your experience like when you had to sit in your community and watch all the resources that were aimed at your wellness debilitate you? That is why I am here. That is why I built my career in a helping profession to dismantle all the narrative to say that Rodney and Hakeem are only here as disciplinarians because we have the expertise to heal the world, only if we're given the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. I think that I'd like to hear also from Hakeem related to this question, right? What can institutions do better? And I think I heard a little bit about from everyone really what's going on in the classrooms, right? Because I know we have a lot of faculty here who may not be themselves in the helping professions, but we know that everyone has a role to play, right? In opening these doors for Black male students in particular. So what can be done differently in the classroom? What can institutions be doing differently to support Black men?
There's a few things. And, I think that when I think about it, I think right? We talk about making data-informed decisions a lot in the field, right? And I think sometimes data can be impervious to fear, impervious to stereotype, impervious to ignorance, you know, quite frank about it. So, but when I say this, when I mean as far as like the Black male experience, there is, as we think about how we reach Black men, how we teach Black men, and how do we humanize Black men in the educational space and schooling, right? That the data, right? The data is really screaming in our face that there's not enough happening. There's the neglect that's happening, right? There's like when you think about Black males in higher education, as far as getting their degrees, less than half of Black women since 1975 or 76 in the last 30, 40, 50 years. So like there's something there. Like this, it's not because Black men don't want to go to school, they don't want to go to college. There's something baked in there that's stifling their opportunity to pursue higher education and to get their degree. So we have to really peel back the layers of that onion, right? And I think as far as, again, that handoff from K through 12, how do we find ways to rethink and reframe our modalities of teaching, right? I have a son, he's about to be 2 years old in April, you know, a busybody. He likes to move. Every time I work from home, I take him to the park 4 times a day. I got to take them to the park so many times. You expect these young people, particularly Black male young men, to be in a space for 8 hours and have a 30-minute recess and to be able to focus. They need to get outside. They need to be able to you know, really let out that energy, right? Because if they don't, it's going to show itself in the class. And then not, again, a teacher not having that cultural lens, not understanding, they think that the student is acting out. They don't know how to focus, so on and so forth. So the modalities are how we even teach our boys. How do we even identify the ways in which we learn? We're a kinetic people. We like to move. We like different things, right? So the way the structure of schooling is in education really is at the disadvantage of the learning styles of black boys, right? And so that's something that we have to talk about and have to really reframe in regards to those different modalities. And of course, the cultural awareness, understanding in regards to how students show up to the space, you know, if a student comes into class wearing a hoodie, like whatever that may be, as long as he's in there paying attention and learning, that shouldn't matter. Yeah, that's not a disruption. He's got a hoodie on, right? So how did, you know, all these different things, right? Not thinking anything negative about that, right? Not bringing in the macro level socialization of like the criminalization of a hoodie, right? Through Trayvon Martin, but knowing that like our boys, that's how we dress sometimes, right? That's how we show up. It doesn't mean you don't want to learn. So I think there's things in regards to that piece. Right now, I had a student recently, you know, 4.0 student sharp. He wants to go into cybersecurity major. There's so many young men that's looking to go into STEM, but trying to get it out into getting into the field. And so I had connected him with somebody I knew at Riot Games and took him to like the Riot Noir brunch in South Central LA like 2 weeks ago. And now he's talking to the head of cybersecurity at Riot Games. So there's a lot going on in regards to Black men wanting to get into the STEM fields, right? So how do we make an entry point into STEM? One of those things is through video games and all these different ways. So really being creative in how we think about how we're teaching our young boys and where we're meeting them at, what those needs are. I think a lot of times as educators, we just shoot in the dark and kind of a one shoe fits all, like a kind of a uniform way of like teaching and thinking everybody will learn that way. And I think that's a huge disservice. So I think that's one of those big things too. And I think also that sense of belonging. Young men need to be loved on, right? I'm in a space where I have young men who never, like, they have met me and they like, you're the first man to ever tell me you love me, like their whole life.
Hakeem, I have a 13-year-old son. I kiss him every night.
That part, exactly.
Every night. I say,
night.
Good night, son.
Yep.
I love you. Have a good sleep.
Yep.
And I kiss him. And you know what I took that from, Hakeem?
What's that?
I took it from the Wayans brothers.
Oh yeah.
Literally, I watched them brothers.
Yeah, they do that all the time.
And they kiss and they hug, and there's nothing associated with it besides older Black men letting younger Black men know that they're there for them.
They're for them, giving them permission.
Cut you off, but I just wanted to say that with my 13-year-old son,
absolutely.
I don't care how he pushes me away.
Nope, he's gonna get this love.
Me his elbow.
He's gonna get this love.
I'm like, dude, no. Forget that. you gotta know that this big Black dude loves you.
That's a fact.
And he's gonna kiss your face every night before you go
That's
to
a
bed.
fact.
And
That's
I
a fact.
took
I
that
love
from
that.
the Wayans brothers when they kissed each other every night. When I
Mhm.
saw Damon kissing Sean, I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
I didn't let it slide.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anyways, I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's great. No, I'm glad you
said-
added that. I'm glad you said
Sorry,
it. 'Cause I
Joy.
think that, I mean, we all, I mean, we relate to that. So I think in regards to being able to display that love, right? And what that love through action, love through words, affirmations, things like that, right? Letting, I think that's really important. That positive racial socialization. A young man shouldn't go through K through 12 not knowing that, Garrett Morrison made the traffic light, right? They drive and stop at lights all the time. Just people with the curriculum and things that they're learning. How do you see yourself as a creator, as an intellectual, as an inventor, right? As somebody who creates different industries, right? All these different things in regards to that positive racial socialization is critical, right? And that sense of belonging, seeing yourself in a position of prominence, right? That's really important. And so I think that's really a really big deal. I think that social emotional learning is a really big tool right now in regards to the SEL framework of how to understand how to help young men emote, how to even identify their emotions, how to express and regulate their emotions. So SEL, social emotional learning, is a great framework that a lot of educators and teachers are starting to use in their teaching styles and things like that. So there's a lot there. I think with DH, as far as us having a intentional male success alliance, right? Where we have young brothers coming to the space all the time, being able to get that brotherhood fellowship, really being able to have real conversations about what's going on in society, how does it relate to them, right? What is their role in it? How to be leaders, navigating masculinity and manhood, rites of passage, all of these different things. And of course, the one big thing is mentorship. How do we try to find ways to be connectors of folks who are in positions to mentor these young men, right? And give them, even if they're not getting it at school, they might not have a lot of faculty at their school, a lot of staff that look like them. How do we partner critically with organizations in the community and like nonprofits and things like that to get these brothers exposure to other men who are doing great things in life, who are being leaders, right? So there's a few things there that we can play with. But I think one thing that Donald said, I thought, and I wanted to kind of talk about, was the matriarchal kind of leaning with some of the work. And I think one of the things is too, with the field, and I think the other piece that gets dicey, and I'm going to mention it because that's who I am, but we have to talk about the ways in which even sometimes with the theory, how theories are and how it centers Black men as the aggressors and the oppressors of Black people, right? So we have to unravel that and kind of talk about the theories and like, what does this really mean in a practical sense, right? Because what's happening is that even for somebody like me, I oversees a Male Success Alliance, I'm hearing people on my campus say that, why do you have an MSA, like Black men, y'all have power? And I'm like, what power? What structural power do we have to like impose our will on anybody? And when you look at the data, we at the will of things at the bottom of every outcome. So I think when it comes to some of the theories and things like that from, and I know we love intersectionality and I respect it and took a lot from it, but there's some things there that position Black men in a negative way, to where when you look at the data and say, hey, intimate partner violence is bi-directional in the Black community, it's hard for you to eat. You have cognitive dissonance with that. You don't want to believe it because Black men have been centered to be the aggressors of these things and the ones that perpetuate these things and do these things. So I think we have to really think about, even with the frameworks and the theories that we're using, and offering, in the words of CRT, one of those 7 tenets, counter narratives counter narratives in that regard, right? What are some other theories and other works that we can use to add a different narrative, a different way of thinking in regards to how to teach and reach and love on Black men in this kind of educational setting. So those are some things that I'm thinking about. I don't want to belabor the point, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Hakeem. I noticed that, Rodney, you wanted to make a comment here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Dr. Grant and Hakeem. I think one of the biggest things is that especially in the younger schools, we're not having these conversations. We're not walking into spaces with the opportunity to sit down with young Black men or young Black children and say, hey, listen, there's space for you here, and we're going to create a space for you here. We're going to hold that space for you here, and we're going to talk about what that looks like for you and your journey, right? I know that the children I coached for a long time, I was the only voice of reason that they heard. Like I was the one giving them love and they weren't my children. So I think if we extend the conversation and really sit in spaces where we can have younger children, younger boys into the conversation, we can help them see their value in pushing this work forward. One of the things that was one of my biggest challenges was I didn't understand how valuable my role was as a coach, as a mentor, as a leader, and how I can help other people until the kids' parents, their mothers were saying, you're making an impact on my child. I only know what I knew from my family and as the Marine Corps told me, the leadership styles, but I didn't really understand the magnitude of my reach. And I feel like a lot of these children fall through the cracks. So when you get to the upper level schools, high school, you don't have that capacity. It hasn't been built up in you. I think if we start younger, having those conversations, putting men around them to support them and encourage them, even when it comes to schools, right? Schools need to be educated. Just because you have a degree doesn't make you knowledgeable. It doesn't mean you have the wisdom. It doesn't mean you have the skill set to sit in spaces and have these types of conversations. I have a twin brother who actually runs a mentoring program, and his biggest adversaries, go back to matriarchal, right, is the females that he's working with and working for, trying to incorporate a program that's designed for young boys to build them up, right? And so he's trying to do it at a lower level, but I feel like we need to find a way and inroad into, especially in this area surrounding schools, LA County, we need to find those type of opportunities to go into schools and start really having those conversations that are foundational, that's going to help us move the work forward. Because a lot of young men, they don't see the helping profession as a way in, right? It's not sports, it's not entertainment. Like our focal point and our vision is really based upon Eurocentric, right? Greed, money, yada, yada, yada. We're not getting back into looking out for each other, taking care of each other. And I feel like if we get that opportunity, then we can move the work forward in a much more aggressive way.
Joy, if I may just jump in really quickly, just to make sure that we understand that what Rodney and Hakeem are both describing as it relates to the disenfranchisement of Black men in the helping field is all connected to sexism and misogyny. I want to be very clear. My work in this space is allocated to empowering Black men, empowering men of all backgrounds, but also paying attention to the fact that the reason why me as a Black man is able to carve out this space of supporting Black and brown men in the helping field is because we have disproportionately placed the burden on helping on women, because we have consistently said that this is the only thing that you can do. And as a result, we've talked about and amplified toxic masculinity, making it feel like men like Hakeem and Rodney are not incentivized for falling into this space. And so as we move forward through this discussion, I cannot with my own integrity, working in all the fields that I work in, honor this discussion without saying that, hey, we have to have this conversation about all these things that Rodney are talking about and all these things that Hakeem are talking about, and our disenfranchisement and how we're not welcome into the helping field, how we're forced to be disciplinarians, how we're forced to not let our expertise in the actual helping be seen. I cannot, with integrity, acknowledge those pieces without saying the reason they exist is because we've made women and professionals like you and Camille feel like it is the only space in which you exist. And so as we talk about these things and we're amplifying the voices of men in the helping field, I'd be remiss as a DEIB practitioner to not acknowledge the fact that the reason why Rodney, myself, and Hakeem are in these spaces that we currently exist in is because we've consistently forced women, Black, brown, white, in other words, to feel like their only space is in this field. It's not a coincidence that the majority of new school teachers are white women. It's not a coincidence. It's the way that the structure of sexism and the intersectionality of misogyny has created this. The whole system needs to be unpacked and revamped to welcome Rodney and Hakeem into this world. It's not a thing where we're saying we need to fix the system. The system is working exactly as it was designed to work, to disenfranchise Black, poor, brown people into undereducation. Like I said earlier, research shows us that if you have 2 Black male teachers in your elementary school matriculation, it increases your chances of attending college by 32%. 32%. That data is non-deniable. Now we need to have conversations about how sexism and misogyny makes it such that Hakeem and Rodney are only welcome into this field if they're participants in the prison and school pipeline. That's the problem that we're talking about here. How do we honor the fact that Rodney and Hakeem are coming into this space wanting to help everybody, to make sure that women who are survivors of domestic violence, men who are survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, that children who are being disenfranchised from their schools, how do we make sure that they are seen as equal value to every woman who enters this field? We can only fight that if we're being honest about the fact that not only are these industries rejecting men because we don't see them as valuable in this space, but also that we're disproportionately honoring women in this space because we see them as kitchen workers. I can't be more transparent about that. And if we're really honest about looking to unpack the problems associated with this space, we can't talk about how we pigeonhole men without how we pigeonhole women.
Absolutely. That's a really great point, right? That sexism is what, as you said, facilitates these dynamics. And we often talk about sexism as harming women, but we don't acknowledge how it harms men. Right. And then when we bring
Joy, I'm not trying to make it such that we're talking about men being harmed hugely by sexism, so on and so forth, just acknowledging that as a result of internalized sexism, men are not being brought into these spaces. So I don't want to be confused at all by saying that women are not the disproportionate negative impactees of sexism. I'm not trying to do the man, the male privilege thing. I'm saying that if we really want to do this right, let's acknowledge how I was about to say curse word, let's acknowledge how we're hurting women and disenfranchising men, but not to amplify how men are being disenfranchised, but to say, we're really pissing on women in order to not make this work. How do we collaborate to make this work? Sorry, Joy.
No worries, no worries. I wanted to bring in Camille. What other research, what other questions do you think we need to be exploring, both academically, in our practices, in our divisions, in our department meetings? And I know that you have some additional resources that you want to share with folks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is we have to do exactly what we've done today, right? Which is to make space and create space for Black men to be heard, right? The panel was inspired by my dissertation. I could go on and on about that, but it wasn't about my dissertation and my work and this, that, and the other. It was about actually presenting not only counter narratives, but images, and actually putting real people with lived experience, right? Not only as self-identified Black men, but professionals, right? And people with lived experience to the table to speak their truth, right? And so if we are looking at things from a framework around, sort of what that looks like in the research, we can even pull in the fact that, Black men in the labor force in particular, they earn about $400 to $500 less than white men, right? Per week. $400 to $500 less per week than white men, just in the labor force generally.
And just
right?
FYI, you multiply that by 4 to figure out what it is per month.
Exactly.
Sorry, Professor.
Exactly, right? So I think it's important to, number one, make sure that we create space to value the voices of Black men, particularly those who are in the helping professions. We got to understand that once they get there, we got to actually value not only what they have to say, but value them in other ways, like fair pay, right? I think another thing we have to do is to really be thinking about the ways in which helping professions like social work have contributed to the stereotypes, right, around Black men. In particular, we know that there's a historical trauma, right, around families. Social work has a stereotype of kind of being the kid snatchers, right? And so we have to combat that as a profession generally, but think about the actual lived experience of someone, who may have had a social worker who did not tell them, positive messages like, Rodney and Hakeem and Dr. Grant sort of mentioned and reinforced as important. So sometimes the representation that was there may have been negative, right? So we're combating a whole sort of host of issues around stigma, around around stereotypes, around questioning masculinity from being associated with the helping profession. I think as with social work, we always have this sort of conversation about meeting people where they are, right? Well, where are the Black men? They're not absent. They're not invisible. They're not ghosts. I know I was able to pull together 3 of them in the drop of a hat, right? And there are plenty more that are not in this space, right? So it's not just about meeting them where they are, but obviously it's also about understanding where to go. Like, how can you meet them if you don't know, if you're not sort of connected, right, to the natural spaces and abilities and sort of spaces that they're already connected with, right? So for instance, if you think about the concept of caregiving, I know about 5 Black men who are helping to take care of grandmamas, aunties, mamas, fathers, right? So we have to reposition our idea of what it looks like to be in a helping profession. And I think additional research can continue to sort of push out that sort of counter narrative about what it means to be a helper. We've heard Rodney talk about him being a coach. I know tons of Black men who coach Little League and, AAU and, whatever else. Right? So go to where they are, understand sort of the sort of natural spaces in which they already dwell. We talked about mentorship. I think Hakeem mentioned mentorship. I know tons of Black men who volunteer their time or are looking to volunteer their time at local YMCAs, find the brothers on the basketball court, right? So it's not that Black men are averse, right, to being in the helping profession from the standpoint of it being something that's such a sort of anomaly. We as a Black, in the Black community, we have a lot of sort of communal ways about us, right? We take care of our own, right? And so I think it's important to just honor where people are and what they naturally do and be able to draw from that. And also not enter spaces as if we know everything, no matter how we identify, right? So we have to ask the questions and really be willing to listen and acknowledge, again, sort of what things are already being done. We have to, again, be able to figure out what are some of the systemic barriers that get in the way of Black men coming into helping professions. So, you know, we can be gatekeepers out, or we can be gatekeepers for good, right? So there's so many things that we need to do to continue to explore this issue in a number of facets, in a number of ways. And I think for us to have honest conversations again like this is definitely a start. And then finally, I would say one of the things that is really important is to think through the ways in which we internalize our own sort of racism and misogyny that Dr. Grant so eloquently identified, because it has not necessarily anything to do with the color of our skin, but we have to understand and recognize the way in which society is structured. And so a lot of times, you know, we do ourselves a disservice because we adopt different mentalities that help us, that sort of move us in a particular way, right? As opposed to stepping back and thinking about examining our own biases and examining sort of the ways in which we move through the world that are not necessarily helpful, right? But that can be harmful, right? How much do we adopt the stereotype that there are no, you know, good Black men, that there are no good, you know, Black teachers, right? So we have to challenge ourselves first to think through the ways in which we continue to perpetuate those types of narratives and reposition Black men not as possessions, not as perpetrators, right? But human beings that have promise and who are already doing the work. It's up to us to find them.
Professor Henderson, I'm about to speak truth to power. Excuse me, Joy. I feel like I keep interrupting you, Joy. I'm so sorry. I'm going to be really quickly with this one. As Professor Henderson describes what she describes, I'm going to refer to her as Dr. Henderson, speaking truth to power, as she completes her dissertation on this work. Because when we talk about growth and we talk about development, we need people who are in positions of privilege in spaces to amplify the work, right? And so as a man, in so many spaces that I exist in, I'm able to say, I have been granted power in this space because of my academic privilege, because of my speech privilege, because of all these areas of privilege that I exist in. The one area of privilege that I don't exist in is the helping field. Professor Henderson, however, does, because she's a woman in this field who is amplifying the voices of men in this field and saying, I got some access. I'm going to say these words. I'm going to dedicate my entire dissertation to making sure that people understand that this particular area of marginalization needs to be amplified. We got Black boys being suspended from preschool. The reason why these Black boys are being suspended from preschool disproportionately compared to white boys is because there are not enough Hakeems and Rodneys in the space. However, there's lots of Camilles in the space. And what the soon-to-be Dr. Henderson is saying is that part of her work is to dismantle the sexism and misogyny that puts all this stuff on her shoulders. She's saying, forget this. I've been burdened with this my entire intergenerational history, meaning that Black women have been disproportionately burdened with experiencing and understanding the knowledge that breaks the cycle of this stuff. She's decided to dedicate her dissertation to saying, I need to amplify Black men who I know are already doing this work, but because of sexism and misogyny, don't get the access. And now I'm saying, I don't want that Black man who's a teacher in that school. I don't need him to be the disciplinarian. I need him to be the teacher. I don't need the Black man who's the therapist in that school to be the disciplinarian or the step coach teacher. I need him to be the therapist. And what the soon-to-be Dr. Henderson is demonstrating by bringing us all together today is that dedication of how we seed power, C-E-D-E-D, seed power. That additional D was the past tense. How we seed power to say, I know, and I know Professor Henderson personally, so I know she gets this. She's saying, I know I've been disenfranchised as a woman. I know I've been disenfranchised as a Black woman. But what I know is in this specific space, we need Black and brown men to infiltrate in order to get it right, which is why I honor the space that she's created for us today to make sure we can come together to have this critical conversation. Because you know what? Next time I enter a K-12 space, I don't want anybody telling me I need to tell somebody to sit down and get into their space. I'm here as a mental health professional. I'm not a disciplinarian. Certainly, I can coach your basketball team, your soccer team, your rugby team. I can't coach your rugby team because I don't know rugby, but I can do all that. I can do all that. But how about you honor the expertise that I have developed as a mental health professional to come and get this stuff right? And that's why I'm so excited to be here alongside both Hakeem and Rodney today, who are developing their acumen to be helping professionals, and the soon-to-be Dr. Henderson, as she sees her privilege as a woman in the helping field who has historically been honored for saying, yes, Black woman, come and help us get this right. She's not here to do that tonight. She's here to say, these Black boys and brown boys are being hurt. How do we make it such that we get more Black and brown men in this field to stop these injuries and to heal the injuries that have already been implanted? It's critical. It's huge.
Thank you, Dr. Grant, for those comments. I think it's clear that we're really just scratching the surface with this topic. Hopefully we have, inspired you to think about this question. And I'm going to borrow some of the language that you just used. How can we all be co-conspirators in the infiltration of Black men in the helping professions? I hope we've provided some suggestions, some helpful things for both faculty to think about, certainly our campus more broadly. Thank you again so much to all of the panelists for sharing your time, your wisdom, your experiences, and being willing to engage in this dialogue so that we can build a better, more equitable and sustainable, Cerritos College and world for our students and campus community. I want to also, thank all of the audience members who have stuck with us a little bit past our time. Thank you for being a part of the space, this conversation. We will be sharing out the link for this so that you can share it with your colleagues and friends and students, right? So we can amplify this discussion. I also want to give you a heads up for next month. We have our next panel coming up on housing justice, where we're going to hear from activists and organizers in our local area, Stay Housed LA, Long Beach Forward, and Long Beach Residents Empowered. And so I want to thank Falcons Rising, of course, for hosting this panel and these important conversations. Wishing everyone health and safety. Please take care, be good to each other. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you. Joy, real quick, I wanted to just share that we're supposed to have a resource list, but I forgot to pull it together, but I have my little thing. I don't know if we have the email addresses of those who attended today. I'd be happy to share a resource list, absolutely, so it can be emailed out. And again, another just quick shout out that next month, March, is National Social Work Month. And I think it's important to not only explore sort of helping professions broadly, but really think about the systems and the seats and where we sit. And so while I'm a social worker, I'm not afraid to challenge my profession, right, to do better. And I think it's important that all of us think about the ways in which we can challenge the systems that we participate in to do better. So I think we have lots of follow-up conversations that could typically be, that can certainly be had. But it doesn't mean I'm not proud to be a social worker. I absolutely am. And because I am, and I wear that badge of honor with pride, I have a duty to challenge my profession to do better. I'm proud to be a social worker because, right, of that fact. So.
Thank you, Camille. We can all challenge, right, our professions to do better for sure. That's part of our responsibility. Thanks, everybody.
Joy, thank